Hello, and welcome to the Thyroid Warrior podcast. I'm Ebony, and I'm here as your wellness facilitator. I'm going to be sharing my experiences in managing Hashimoto's disease. I really hope that it'll help you on your personal journey. Keep in mind, however, this does not substitute for medical advice. It is only for your information and motivational purposes only. Now, let's get started. Hello, friends. I purposely came on at the last day of Thyroid Awareness Month to deliver this podcast episode. And all I can say to you all is, wow. This has definitely been one of the more fun series that I have done, mostly because it is talking about the brain. And you all know I'm a nerd. I'm okay with that. And you all understand that about me. So we're all good. But we also got a chance to have a treat last week with Kirsten from Strong Fitness Magazine. And part of why I also wanted her to kind of come and speak and shake things up, because as I mentioned, talking about the brain can be, well, boring if I'm being honest, if that's not your thing. But also, one, talking about the brain is important because I always want you to be armed with knowledge, no matter how difficult of a concept is or how not sexy something is. But two, I also wanted you to be able to see and understand that we all have something in common. We are all working towards being the best versions of ourselves. And I always want to show you and present to you different opportunities to do and be just that, and to provide you with resources that will help you to ensure that you never feel alone. And it's been a really good year so far, not in terms of life happening, but I've gotten a chance to really and truly connect with more of you than I ever have. And all I have to do is say thank you and let's keep going. Because one of the things that I'm really excited about that Cynthia has already started playing with and has shown me some issues with it, but my health journal is finally going to be able to come out this year. So I'm very excited about that. And what's really key for me is helping you to live a happy, healthy, and joy-filled life, period. And I want you to know and understand and always have the knowledge in your back pocket. And for that reason, we're going to go ahead and finish out talking about our brain and the thyroid gland by talking about just that, because sometimes it can be really difficult, so to speak, for us to really stay focused on the issues at hand. And for example, with me, I've had an autoimmune disease for over 10 years, but there are times when I still have to brush up on my thyroid and my levels and understanding how everything is really and truly working together. And I find that when I have that jolt, so to speak, of that reminder or reading books that really and truly help to inform my knowledge about the differences in our thyroid and hormones and changes over time and what to expect and how to really anticipate things, it makes it that much more fun and exciting to bring that to you. So we're going to talk about our thyroid gland today. And it produces two hormones, T4 and T3. And really the main purpose of T3 and T4 is that it regulates our metabolism. But moreover, those particular hormones are also going to be involved with protein synthesis, with the maturity process of our central nervous system. And anytime we have a deficiency in these two hormones in particular, I've read many of studies in terms of how that actually affects our minds and can lead to mental issues in our bodies, or in our brains, I should say. And we know that when we have an underactive thyroid gland, it leads to hypothyroidism, And when you have an overactive thyroid gland, it leads to hyperthyroidism or Graves' disease. And this is where it gets really confusing, because when our brain, and hence why I introduced the different parts of the brain first before I talked about the thyroid gland itself, but anytime your TSH isn't really being produced at the optimum level, your brain is like, wait a minute, what's happening? Why don't I sense any TSH? And what it does is it starts to make more TSH because it is sensing that your body doesn't have enough. So that is why you will see a high TSH level in people with hypothyroidism. It's really backwards. So when your brain is trying to make sure, because remember, we have so many processes happening in our bodies that our brain is like, wait, no, hold on, pause. This is not good. And sometimes your brain kind of goes into overdrive to produce those thyroid hormones. And it's all bad from a perspective where we finally start to perceive or experience the symptoms of what happens when we have too much thyroid stimulating hormone. And when you think about that, the symptoms that we start to notice can be severe. So when we have too much of the TSH floating around in our bodies and we develop this hypothyroidism, we're going to experience the memory loss, depression, so much of our hormones are actually, or I would say about 20%, I won't say so much, that's exaggerating, but 20% of our hormones, or I would say our T4, is actually converted in our gut and then our liver. So it makes sense as to why when we have too much of this hormone flooding our digestive system, it leads to constipation, because your digestive system is already trying to break down this T4 and you're like, wait a minute, what is happening? And then you start to have that increase in the weight gain and the weakness, and just so many things start to present themselves. And guess what? You start to have those abnormal menstrual cycles as well as a decreased libido. Again, this is why I introduced you to those various hormones in past episodes, so that you can have an understanding of why your menstrual cycle can be off, why you have a decrease in libido. If you're not sleeping, you're going to have issues with melatonin production. And remember, our limbic system and our thyroid gland is connected to our central nervous system. Your central nervous system also has a lot to do with smooth and skeletal muscles, meaning you will experience more muscle cramps or muscle aches. And then if you're not actually having those proteins and cells and all those things that are so important to be synthesized to create those new muscle cells and tissues and all those things, guess what? You're going to experience that weakness. So when you're going through all of these things, your body is really and truly having a really tough time processing. So before I get into the parathyroid glands, another thing that I want to also point out is that T3 is converted from T4. So really, when your body is producing that T4, you have to make sure that you're not just getting that TSH level done, but you're also looking at your T4, your free T3, as well as your reverse T3, because the free T3 is an active component. That is what's doing the work in your body, and that basically is the gas for your metabolic processes, whereas reverse T3 is the brakes. So your reverse and free T3 are also working in concert in your body to make sure that your car, so to speak, which is your body is functioning appropriately, because we all know what happens if your brake line kind of doesn't work anymore, you crash and it's not good. That was a really morbid example, but extreme, because when you have so much going on, it really just wreaks havoc. And even when you think about, just to go back to TSH, when you have low TSH values, that means that your body is producing less TSH because there's so much of it already kind of floating around in your body from a T3 and T4 perspective. So your brain's like, yeah, no, I'm not making any more of that. No, thank you. So you may see a lower amount of TSH in your body, both of which you have to get your blood levels drawn. I am not a proponent of just kind of testing and guessing. Go get your labs drawn. Go get your blood drawn. Figure out what's going on and look at that with your doctor. Do not suffer in silence. And if you have a doctor that does not want to take or order the exams for you, go somewhere else. Or see if it's possible to call back to the office and say, hey, I forgot to tell my doctor to order such and such. Your blood basically is good for 7 days. And if you need to get any add-on tests, you can have that done. So for example, I'll take me for an example. I'm not telling you what to do, but I have my primary care and I have my endocrinologist. Fortunately, I have a great endocrinologist right now, and he knows that I'm going to ask for my antibodies. I'm going to ask for my free T3, my reverse T3, my T4. He knows that I'm going to ask those questions. I want to get that full blood panel. I want to understand what's going on. So if there's something that he forgets, I will call in and say, hey, I noticed in my after visit summary that he ordered this blood work. We forgot one. Can you add that on? Or if I have an endocrinologist that I'm not too fond of, which this has happened in the past, I will call up my primary care doc and say, hey, I just got blood done. Can you put in a lab for these things that were left off from that study? So unfortunately, that is how I've had to operate a few times as it relates to having things done. But sometimes it's necessary because you need to have that complete picture. Now, I always encourage you to talk to your doctor and develop that relationship. And if you need to go back and take a listen to being your own patient advocate, I spoke about this at length. So let's briefly touch on our parathyroid glands. And those are just little glands that sit at the back of your thyroid. And there are 4 of them. And the main hormone that they produce is your parathyroid hormone. And it basically is going to regulate calcium metabolism. And that is going to make sure that the blood calcium is basically where it should be. And this is often something that you may have issues with if you've had thyroid cancer as well, or if you had to have your thyroid gland removed in all associated parts. And this is also going to be important because blood calcium levels also will impact your bones, kidneys, and small intestines. So that is very, very important that we're looking at the entire picture. Okay, so let's talk about, first, it's really your adrenal glands. And again, those are going to sit at the tops of your kidneys. And they're really involved in that fight or flight response. And the adrenal steroids are going to play a role in helping your body deal with any external stressors. So your adrenal gland has basically an outer and inner part to it, okay? And they kind of function separately, but when I said your adrenal cortex, that's basically the outer kind of layer, and then you have an inner adrenal medulla that
basically function together. So your adrenal cortex is pretty much the majority of that gland. And that is what is so important in terms of having your steroid hormones. And they basically, there are three kind of components or functions, so to speak. So it's going to have your mineral corticosteroid, and that's what regulates your electrolyte balance. Again, it's a big reason why I tell you, make sure that you're looking at the minerals in your body. Look at your electrolytes. Pay attention to that. And it also controls fluid retention. So you want to make sure that things like your sodium and potassium levels, as well as, let's say, your blood volume and your blood pressure is good. All of those things are related to those mineralocorticosteroids. And then you also want to make sure that you're paying attention to your cortisol levels, because that cortisol functions to basically increase your blood sugar supply for your tissues, more specifically your brain and your heart. So anytime you have chronic stress, because many of us aren't being chased by bears anymore, but that's going to lead to a decrease in your immune system health. It's going to cause hypertension, stomach ulcer, and it's just crazy. And then when you think of just going on and talking about cortisol, that again is regulating the metabolism of your sugar and different molecules, so to speak, in your body. So you want to make sure that you are working on your managing your stress levels and all those good things in order to promote health, which is why I talk so much about movement and exercise and diet. And finally, your sex steroids, so estrogen, progesterone, those are so important. And we talked about the outer or the adrenal cortex, and then the inner or your adrenal medulla it's a part of your sympathetic nervous system. So that's where you have your epinephrine and your norepinephrine comes in. So your epinephrine is known as adrenaline, and then your norepinephrine is your noradrenaline. So these, remember that nice little big word that I mentioned before, and that was your catecholamine? These hormones regulate cardiac output, heart rate, they dilate blood vessels, they increase or enhance your alertness, they will increase your respiration or your heartbeat and all those things. And that is where the fight or flight response comes from. So this is why, for me, it's so important to talk to you about these things, because this will help you understand where all the symptoms come from. So we talked about your thyroid, but as well as your adrenal glands in this particular episode. But the next episode, we're going to bring everything together, and we're going to talk through how do we make sure that you are supporting your body as best you can. And with that, be happy, be whole, and be well. Take care.
Okay, thyroid warriors, get out there and take things one step at a time. Remember, be great, reflect on your triumphs, and as always, be well. Take care.